Before the first boarding announcement echoed through the bright glass halls of the airport, a young woman with tear-filled eyes stepped in front of a complete stranger and whispered words that would change two lives forever. Her trembling hands clutched a worn passport, while fear and desperation covered her face more than exhaustion ever could. She looked over her shoulder as though every passing traveler was hunting her, then gathered the last bit of courage she had left. With a broken smile that barely hid her panic, she quietly begged him to pretend she was his wife for just a few minutes. The man had never seen her before, yet something in her frightened eyes reminded him of the promise he had made to himself years ago, that if he ever had the chance to save someone, he would never look away again. Neither of them knew that a single act of kindness inside that crowded airport would uncover a painful past, expose a dangerous secret, and lead them toward a future neither believed they deserved. If you believe kindness and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Tales Journey. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories that remind the world compassion still exists. It was a clear spring morning, and sunlight poured through the enormous airport windows, filling every corner with soft natural light. Families hugged each other before departures, business travelers hurried toward security gates, and children laughed while dragging colorful suitcases across the polished floor. Among thousands of ordinary travelers walked 36-year-old Rowan Mercer, a quiet architect whose life had become painfully predictable after losing his wife to cancer 5 years earlier. He had buried himself in work ever since, convincing himself that keeping his heart closed was easier than risking another unbearable goodbye. His ticket was for a conference in Seattle where he would present an affordable housing project that could change hundreds of struggling families' lives. Despite the professional success waiting ahead, the emptiness inside him followed everywhere. Just as Rowan approached the security checkpoint, someone lightly grabbed the sleeve of his jacket. Standing before him was a woman who looked no older than 30. Her name, he would later learn, was Alara Bennett. She wore a simple pale blue blouse beneath a beige cardigan, dark jeans, and comfortable white sneakers dusty from travel. Her brown hair had been hurriedly tied into a loose ponytail, with several strands falling across her tear-stained face. She carried only a small backpack and a faded handbag that looked years old. Although she tried to stand straight, fear made her shoulders shake uncontrollably. Without waiting for permission, she leaned closer and whispered that impossible request. She pleaded for him to tell a group of men watching nearby that she was his wife. She explained only that if those men reached her first, she would lose everything. Rowan's instincts warned him to walk away. Airports were full of scams and misunderstandings. One wrong decision could destroy his career or place him in legal trouble. Yet the panic in her eyes did not look rehearsed. It looked painfully real. Before Rowan could answer, 3 sharply dressed men appeared from across the terminal. They scanned the crowd with unusual intensity, speaking into wireless earpieces while pointing toward different travelers. Alara's breathing became uneven. Without thinking any further, Rowan gently placed his arm around her shoulders and looked directly toward the approaching men with calm confidence. The tallest man slowed his pace as he reached them. His polite smile never reached his eyes. He casually asked whether Rowan had seen a woman traveling alone who might seem confused. Rowan answered naturally that he and his wife had been rushing to catch their connecting flight all morning and had noticed no one else. Alara lowered her head exactly as an exhausted spouse might after hours of travel, saying nothing. The men exchanged uncertain glances. After a tense silence that felt endless, they apologized and continued searching elsewhere. Only when they disappeared into another terminal did Alara finally allow herself to breathe. Tears rolled freely down her face, but this time they carried relief instead of fear. Rowan gently asked why strangers would chase someone who looked terrified rather than dangerous. Alara hesitated. Years of hiding had taught her never to trust anyone. But she also understood that without Rowan's kindness she would already have been caught. As they walked toward a quiet seating area overlooking the runways, she slowly revealed pieces of a story so unbelievable that Rowan struggled to imagine anyone surviving it. 2 years earlier, Elara had worked as a financial analyst for a charitable investment organization that publicly claimed to help disaster victims rebuild their lives. Behind closed doors, however, several executives secretly moved millions of donated dollars into shell companies while desperate families received almost nothing. When Elara accidentally uncovered evidence of the fraud, she reported it internally, believing honesty would protect innocent people. Instead, she became the target. The executives destroyed her reputation, accused her of stealing confidential files, and convinced powerful associates that silencing her permanently would be easier than facing prison. She had spent months moving between safe houses, changing jobs, avoiding social media, and trusting almost no one. Every time she thought she had escaped, someone somehow discovered where she was. Today she was trying to board a flight to testify before federal investigators who had finally agreed to hear the evidence she had secretly preserved. Rowan listened without interrupting. Every sentence reminded him of his late wife, Amelia, whose favorite saying had always been that truth often traveled the hardest road. He had admired those words when life was comfortable. Now he understood how expensive honesty could become. They walked together beneath the bright daylight streaming through enormous windows. Travelers continued smiling, buying coffee, reading newspapers, and taking vacation photographs, completely unaware that only a few steps away someone was fighting for her future. Rowan realized how often the greatest battles remained invisible. While waiting near the departure gate, Elara finally smiled for the first time. It was small and fragile, but genuine. She admitted she had almost lost hope before seeing him. She said there had been something peaceful about the way he stood alone, watching airplanes instead of staring at his phone like everyone else. In that single moment she believed he might still see another human being instead of another inconvenience. Those words struck Rowan deeply because he had spent years believing he had become emotionally distant. Perhaps grief had not destroyed his ability to care after all. Perhaps it had only buried it beneath loneliness. Just when it seemed the danger had passed, Rowan noticed the same three men entering the gate area once again. This time they were moving with far greater confidence, as though someone had finally identified exactly where Elara had gone. His heartbeat quickened. Without speaking, Rowan quietly reached for Elara's hand as the men began walking directly toward them. To be continued in the next response with the rest of the complete story. Rowan's heartbeat pounded in his ears, but he refused to let fear show on his face. The airport remained bright with midday sunlight pouring through the towering glass walls, while travelers continued chatting, laughing, and preparing to board their flights, completely unaware that a silent battle was unfolding among them. Elara felt her hands grow cold as she noticed the three men closing the distance between them. Every instinct told her to run, but she knew that running now would only confirm their suspicions. Instead, she stood beside Rowan, trusting the stranger who had already risked more for her than anyone else had in 2 long years. Just as the men approached, a boarding announcement echoed across the terminal, calling passengers for Elara's flight to begin lining up. The distraction created a brief wave of movement as dozens of travelers formed a queue. Rowan calmly picked up Elara's backpack and gently guided her into the line as though they had traveled together for years. When the tallest man reached them once again, he demanded to see Elara's identification, claiming there had been confusion about a missing passenger. Rowan firmly insisted that any official questions should be handled by airport security rather than by private individuals. His confident response attracted the attention of nearby airline staff, who immediately contacted airport officers after noticing the growing tension. Within moments, uniformed security personnel arrived. The three men suddenly became less confident. Rowan quietly explained that these strangers had been following his wife through the terminal, causing obvious distress. Elara, still trembling, produced the encrypted flash drive hidden inside the lining of her handbag and whispered to one of the officers that it contained evidence connected to a major financial crime and that federal investigators were already expecting her arrival. Everything changed. The officers escorted all 5 individuals into a private security office. After verifying Elara's identity and contacting the investigative team waiting at her destination, airport authorities confirmed that she had indeed been under protective review because of an ongoing federal investigation. The three men were questioned separately, and inconsistencies in their stories quickly raised serious suspicion. Before the afternoon was over, law enforcement agencies coordinated across multiple states, leading to the arrest of several executives connected to the charity fraud. Years of stolen donations, hidden accounts, and intimidation finally began to unravel because one frightened woman had refused to destroy the truth. Ilara boarded her flight later that afternoon under official protection. Before leaving, she looked at Rowan with tears of gratitude. She told him that he had restored something she believed had disappeared forever, her faith that strangers could still choose compassion over convenience. Rowan watched the aircraft lift into the clear blue sky, feeling as though a heavy weight had quietly left his own heart as well. Months passed. The investigation dominated national headlines. Millions of dollars were recovered and redirected to families who had originally been promised help after devastating natural disasters. Hospitals received equipment that had been delayed for years. Schools reopened. Entire communities finally received the support that had been stolen from them. Ilara became known not because she sought attention, but because she had refused to remain silent when honesty carried an enormous price. Rowan returned to his architectural work, yet something inside him had changed forever. Instead of hiding behind endless hours at the office, he began volunteering his weekends designing shelters and affordable homes for struggling families. The kindness he had offered at the airport became the beginning of a completely different life. His late wife's memory no longer filled him only with sorrow. Instead, it inspired him to continue living with the same compassion she had always believed in. Nearly a year after that unforgettable day, Rowan received a handwritten envelope with no return address. Inside was a simple invitation to the opening ceremony of a new community center built entirely with recovered charitable funds. At the bottom of the invitation was a single sentence that brought tears to his eyes: "None of this would exist if you had walked away." When Rowan arrived, the center buzzed with children laughing in the sunshine, volunteers planting flowers, and families celebrating a future they once believed impossible. Standing near the entrance was Ilara, healthier, stronger, and smiling with genuine peace. There was no fear left in her eyes. The burden she had carried for so long had finally been replaced by hope. They spent the afternoon talking about everything that had happened since the airport. Neither of them pretended life had become perfect. Pain, loss, and difficult memories still existed. But they had both learned that healing often begins with one unexpected act of courage from someone willing to care. As the sun remained high in the bright daytime sky, Rowan realized that destiny sometimes arrives disguised as an interruption. He had almost ignored a frightened stranger because he feared inconvenience. Instead, that single decision had saved countless lives, restored stolen hope to entire communities, and opened his own heart again after years of loneliness. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Kindness Tales Journey. Your support allows us to continue sharing stories that remind us that compassion can change lives when we least expect it. Sparkle's special request: before this story ends, please comment below with one word, kindness, if you believe a single act of courage can change someone's entire future. Your comment may inspire someone who needs hope today. Rowan often thought back to that ordinary airport morning. Thousands of travelers had passed through those same doors, each carrying dreams, worries, and invisible battles. Only one desperate whisper had reached his ears. Had he chosen to ignore it, history would have unfolded very differently. That memory became the lesson he carried for the rest of his life. Sometimes the greatest miracles do not begin with extraordinary people, they begin with ordinary people who decide not to walk away when someone silently asks for help. And somewhere in the endless stream of travelers passing through airports every day, another frightened soul may still be waiting for one compassionate stranger to say, without hesitation, "You're safe."